Joining me now. That's it. Joining me now on the Knicks Film School podcast. He is not only far more knowledgeable than me about basketball, but he's far more handsome too, despite what some reviewers may say. You can he's the best place to find clips of every Knicks game during the game and the best analysis out there after it. Tom Piccolo, hello, sir. How are you?
Jonathan, I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I don't know what I was getting roasted in the reviews of Knicks Film School on Apple Podcasts. It's crazy, but
these people have no decency.
You know, I'll tell you what, last time I was on, it was December, and you guys told me that you would have me on when things were looking a little rosier, when things were a little bit more positive. And I got to say, it feels like genuinely this is the nadir of the season. Like, you've had me on at the bottom so far, and I don't want to jinx anything, but I don't know if we're going to get much lower than this.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. So we'll go this entire podcast. This should be the title of this podcast, Off Track. We're going to go off track early. When were you on exactly? Maybe Andrew could chime in and help us out. It was December what?
Let me try to figure it out. I remember it was after a 3-game losing streak because Tom said you only have me on after 3-game losing streaks. And when you it had to be either after the Denver game or after either the Milwaukee game or the Golden State game.
So it's December 7th is when it ran.
Oh, so then, yeah, it was. Okay. So it was after the Brooklyn, Chicago, Denver. That was the Denver debacle where they didn't show up at the Garden that day. And then they followed up your appearance with a win. Yay. And then 4 more losses. But here's the interesting thing. I was looking today. Do you realize this team, like less than a month ago, was a game under five? Was a game over 500? That was a thing that actually happened.
That is actually truly shocking to hear. A month ago?
Unless my math is off. Hold on. Yeah, actually, sorry. Exactly a month ago. We were recording this on Tuesday, February 15th. On Saturday, January 15th, they beat the Hawks of Atlanta 117-108 to complete a 3-game winning streak. They were 22-21. And it was not only their 3rd consecutive win, they beat the Spurs by 15 and they beat the Mavs by 23. And then they went and beat the Hawks in Atlanta by 9. That's the same basketball team that we're about to talk about right now. How about that?
Those good vibes feel so long ago. It's like you're talking about a different season here. That's truly wild, but it's good. It's a good reminder that things can change.
That's a good place to start as any. 24 games remain in this season. As we're recording this, I think Atlanta has like a game or two. What it doesn't matter. Whatever. They're 2 games back at the 10th spot. Nobody ahead of them is world beaters. But like, are you out on the season? Are you still like where's your head at?
You know, I've been going back and forth on this as far as like what a successful wrap up to this season would actually be. And like,
God bless you for that, because I don't know the answer.
Well, would getting the 10th seed and earning us a play-in spot, is that a success? I mean, and then I guess from there you'd have to decision tree it out and be like, well, if they win a game but ultimately don't make it to the real first round, like how iterations of that.
And if let's say Cam gets glued to the bench and they've essentially just pissed away a first round pick and they do that. But, RJ Barrett comes back and plays even better than he had. Like there's 1,001 different. Yeah.
So many variables. Yeah. I would say at this, am I out on the season? I certainly don't have a great deal of faith going into any game that the team's going to really wow me or surprise me in any way. And I do kind of want to start there because I was sitting there watching the Thunder game last night, and I know you follow me. You do. You see that I post clips to Twitter, and recently I feel like I have nothing of value or of interest to tweet out there because, and I was kind of wondering why that was. Like, what's going on? And I saw Ariel Pacheco, who's a great Twitter follow as well. He tweeted something that really resonated with me. He said, "Thibs sticks to the same script every game. And that makes it really difficult to gather new information on the Knicks' younger guys and how they look in different contexts. And that just really struck me. It's like that's exactly why I'm having a hard time watching games right now. And really, I don't feel like I'm learning new things. And right, like that's kind of Thibs' whole thing is for the players. You win or you learn. And every moment,
you win or you learn.
Every moment on the floor is another opportunity to learn. And I kind of want to hold him to that same standard. I want someone to ask him post game, what did you learn today, coach? Because like, it doesn't feel like there's been a whole lot of, it just feels very stagnant. It feels like I'm watching the same stuff, the same first play of every game, just like we did last year. We're seeing the same issues in transition. And it's like, I'm having a hard time like gathering new information about these players. And I think that's been hard to kind of like figure out what's going to be successful moving forward. Because I feel like success moving forward is learning more about this team, about our young guys. And I think that would kind of be what I'm looking for going forward.
The organization in the hiring of Tom Thibodeau, I think we could agree, basically said, look, we're going to trust that other segments of our organization make sure that development is happening. And from Thibs' perspective, his contribution to development would be holding the team to a standard in which if you do not do X, Y, and Z, you don't get playing time. And that was agreed upon, and it seemed like it worked okay last year. And then this year, when the best player, among others, has not always showed up and operated by that same standard, shall we say? Is that fair to say of Julius Randle? And now they're at the place where you're talking about, which is like, okay, the priorities may be changing. And I use those words intentionally. The priorities may be changing because it's still in that kind of like weird in between place. They're not like 20 and 40. They're whatever the hell they are. So what do you do now? Because I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you that everything about this team right now feels stagnant. The Thunder game was the first game of the season where I sat down and I watched, and like I genuinely didn't really care whether or not they won or lost. I was just like, why do I care? Because like the something in the Blazer game broke me. And like I don't think that that's a great place to be as an organization. And I know this isn't your wheelhouse because we're not talking like X and O's, but I'm just like kind of riffing off of what you said. And I'm just like, that's kind of, I think more than anything, what has me down to the dumps right now is like this. It's almost like an acknowledged lack of direction. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. And I mean, I'm with you. And you asked me what I would do. I think it's probably easier to predict what I think is going to happen. And
so what do you think is going to happen?
I think it's going to be status quo. I think for the foreseeable future, and no one wants to hear that. And I think people are going to be up in arms about it. But I mean, based on what we've seen, based on what we know about our coach, like, I think we're going to continue to see Burks run out there running the show at point. I think we're going to continue to see the same sets and the continued struggles in crunch time when things slow down. But I mean, I think that what's kind of interesting is like this recent skid has coincided with a few like real changes as far as how the team is operated. I think that Julius Randle, it's not just the stats in recent games. He has made a concerted effort to start pushing the ball, especially quarters 1 through 3. And he looks like a different player in some cases. He is setting real screens and hitting people. Like this is stuff we did not see early in the season.
I would argue that this is even, I don't want to say better than last year because last year was like a special year, but like he didn't play like this last year.
That's the thing. Yeah. He is playing differently from last year, but it's super effective. And I think like, Benji had a really interesting Knicks film thread after the Memphis game about Evan Fournier. And that was about a bunch of different things about how Fournier is getting his shots off. And it included some really interesting sets that frankly, I didn't even notice that we're using to get Evan Fournier open. But a lot of it was about Julius Randle and just like the screens he was setting and what he was doing off ball to get Fournier open. And like, I mean, it's super impressive. Like you would think that would be the biggest story of the season, because Julius Randle's performance, this is the guy on a long-term deal. He's going to be around for a while unless he gets traded, in which case, if we have to use an asset to get off of him, the more he plays better now, the less you have to give up to get rid of him. So
you could argue it's the most important. I don't know if many people would argue this. You can argue it's the most important thing to watch from now until the end of the season.
It's that or Barrett's continued development. Those are the two.
One of those two.
Yeah. So the fact that Randle has been playing this well and the Knicks are still, it's not contributing to winning. It's a very strange dynamic. And I'm trying to wrap my head around why. And, last time I was on this podcast, you and I talked a lot about how the Knicks' offensive woes have been contributing to their lack of defensive intensity and effort, right? They're missing shots. Teams were not only just getting out in transition, it was affecting the Knicks' defensive tenacity and their effort. And it's funny because like Randle is now hitting shots. Fournier is hitting shots. These guys still aren't playing defense, really. Like the defense has now become a real issue. And it's not only in transition, it's communications in half court execution too. And I don't know. It's like, did a lack of accountability early on kind of just linger? And now it's kind of become a bad habits that were set.
I'm wondering if and I'm talking about literally in the last handful of days, if something broke within this team. And it's odd to even say that, because like the Warriors game was just so strange in that not that it came out of nowhere, because like, again, as you just alluded to, they showed signs in the Memphis game. They showed signs in the Lakers game, obviously. Like there were little drips. They showed signs in the Utah game. Like the Denver game was second night of back-to-back. Maybe you toss that out, but like there were signs, and then they actually put it all together with the Warriors game. And for a moment you could talk yourself into, it was that the night that's going to turn it around, where they got past the trade deadline. Guys could just like say, all right, whatever bullshit we were worried about on the court, we're not worried about anymore. We're here. We're going to finish the season. We're going to finish strong. And then, Portland for 2.5 quarters, it's great. And then I don't even know how to describe what happened to end that game. And then the Thunder game was just kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it. So it's just very strange, because so today I was looking at a bunch of numbers, because that's what I do when I am confused. I look at data, and like I look at the Kemba 5-man starting unit, and there's 38, I think, defense starting or 5-man units that have played at least 150 minutes together this season. What do you think that 5-man unit ranks in defensive rating? I'll give you one guess. You only need one.
It's got to be dead last.
It's dead last. And they're not great on offense either. They're like 5th from the bottom on offense. And then, but here's the other kicker. In the first quarter, like how it seems like this team gets off to such slow starts, right? In the first quarter,
right?
The first quarter, that 5-man unit actually at this point has a positive net rating. And then it gets progressively worse. And I'm not even progressively worse. Does not even begin to tell the story. They go from like, my daughter's chiming in here. What do you think of Kemba Walker? You like Kemba? No, she's just chocolate on her face. It's like plus 1.8 in like the first quarter. And then it goes to like minus 20 and then minus 25 and then like minus 28 in the fourth. It falls off a cliff.
Yeah.
The Burks start 5-man unit. And I promise I'm going to tie all this together in a second. It's plus 5 point something per 100, and it's over 200 minutes. So like 200 minutes, it's not everything, but it's also not nothing. Great first quarter, bad second, good third, great fourth, limited sample size. So like I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, so if I'm Tom Thibodeau and I'm looking at these numbers, and I believe he does look at these numbers and he has access to these numbers, it's like, okay, I get it. You could talk yourself into Burks as the starting point guard. We get Rose back. Rose comes in, right as shores up the backup 5. And like on we go. And then, but then I'm like, so and then it just leads me to more questions, which is like, okay, so why does Kemba continue to go out there? Well, Kemba is still out there because I guess he doesn't trust any other point guard without Rose here. And then it's like, but then I go back to the numbers and I look at what the numbers are and I'm like, no, that can't be. So it's like, I see some data where it's like, I get to see, I think I see into what his thinking is. And then I don't know. I'm just at a loss.
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, the rationale for earlier in the season for completely benching Kemba, removing him from the rotation, was always very strange to me, because the notion that, I see Kemba as a starting point guard, that was
always bullshit
for me.
Yeah.
I'm with you, man. Like, that's not a real designation. Like, that, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, he can
and especially the logic was, I don't want to have 3 small guards. Okay, but then there was never any thought to like, well, I mean, I know you see Rose as a backup guy, but like, you can't even experiment with putting Quickley as like that. Like, this is a coach who once put in Keith Bogans in the starting 5 to play him 17 minutes a game, and he started at 80 games that year for the Chicago Bulls. Like, he's done this before. You could have a nominal starter and then just mix and match your way from there. He wanted Kemba gone.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that at this point. And I mean, Kemba, he does bring a lot of just issues on the defensive end. He provides zero resistance in transition, and like, that's your guy back, right? That's your point guard, and he is just a turnstile at the rim. Every like 1 out of 20 plays, he'll swipe and get his hand on the ball, and he'll go out of bounds. But for the most part, that's going to be a foul or it's 2 points. And it's a real problem. He gets targeted. I tweeted about that last night. Like, he gets targeted in pick and rolls. You can't switch him onto a big, because that's it's done. I mean, so Kemba defensively has been a real problem, but I don't know, man. It's a struggle there. I think there are just a lot of it's not all one guy either. You know what I mean? I look at what was successful last season and why the Knicks had such a good defense last year. And you could look at Elfrid Payton if you want to and say that helped. Sure. I guess. A lot of it was Nerlens Noel. Like, Nerlens Noel was, it's the reason he got the contract that he did. I mean, he was a huge part of this team, and he's been an utter non-factor or a complete negative this season. And I think that's a little under discussed. I think it's understood, but I don't think people talk about Nerlens Noel's struggles at the same level as, like, I mean, he was the linchpin of our defense for most of the season, and our defense was the reason we were so good.
And by the way, who's the only player who, when you put him with Kemba Walker, the defense doesn't fall off cliff? It's Nerlens Noel. And like, I was thinking about that today, and it's a almost nothing sample size. It's like a little under 100 minutes, but like, it makes a little sense. Noel's more comfortable going out, hedging on the perimeter, and then scrambling back to his man. So if you have a Kemba Walker out there who can't get around a screen to save his life, like, you need a center like that who's a little bit more mobile. And Noel has been, like you said, Noel's been a non-factor this year.
Yeah, and I do want to go back to these last couple of games, specifically Portland and Oklahoma City.
Please,
which, every time each of these last 2 losses, Knicks fans have been saying worst loss of the season, and they both certainly have their cases. And so you kind of wonder why. Like, why did things dry up so poorly in crunch time? And a big part of it, for sure, is that RJ Barrett wasn't a part of the equation. I mean, RJ Barrett's been our best clutch player this season. The numbers back it up. This is a guy who steps up in these big moments, who wants the ball in big moments. And he wasn't there for either of those games. And like, listen, I listen to your post games. I don't envy your position at all, because like, people just vent to you. And I am just like, oh, poor Macri. This is like, that's a tough.
It's only poor Macri if I dig my own grave, right?
You dig your heels in a bit on Thibs. I mean, look, there are different philosophies towards coaching. Like, I don't think that coaches are, going to be the panacea. You look at form like Mike Budenholzer, who a lot of Bucks fans wanted gone before he won the championship. Frank Vogel,
2-time coach of the year.
Frank Vogel won a championship. Yeah. Now I feel like he's like a laughing stock on Twitter. There's no loyalty to coaches in any way, shape, or form.
No.
But I keep going back to Thibs. Frankly, reckless. The RJ injury was reckless.
Let's talk about this for a second, because look, this was coming. The tidal wave was coming, and it actually had already started before the RJ injury in the last. And God bless you, because I didn't pick up on it. Where you just pointed out, you were just like, Tom Thibodeau. He actually, I don't say lied, but the words that came out of his mouth were not the actual thing that happened, because he was like, we were down.
Wrong.
It was incorrect. He said we were down 13, we were making a run, and as you pointed out, when RJ actually checked into the game, it was down 17. You could say, all right, you're nitpicking. Well, you know what? Actually, not really, because that makes a fucking difference. And it shows, and especially like in that game where they were just getting their ass handed, like they were never going to win that game. It was ridiculous. And then with the timeout snafu, at the end of the Oklahoma City game, it's just like it was bad time. If nothing else, it was bad time.
Yeah, the timeout thing, I can forgive it, frankly.
So can
coaches make mistakes. An injury to the franchise cornerstone in a game that has no chance of being won, it just shows like a removal from reality at this point. Like that was straight up dangerous. Like, it's a coach's job to mitigate risk in those situations. And
but doesn't it go to what you said about where's the coach learning, right? Like, where's the coach adjusting?
Where's the coach learning, but also not putting his players in position for them to learn as much as they can. Like I said, RJ missed a lot of opportunities to learn in these past 3 games,
absolutely,
all of which came down to crunch time. There were actual real learning opportunities in those games that RJ was completely removed from because of this decision from Thibs. And I would like to see Thibs hold himself accountable for it and say, from now on, I'm not going to do that. You know what I mean?
And you wonder, and look, I defend him a lot, because I think some of the stuff that gets targeted at him in terms of call better plays or your rotations or shit. I think some of that stuff is the tried and true things you hear whenever an NBA team is doing poorly. And I'm not saying that is it possible that they could call some better plays? Absolutely. They could call some better plays. Is it possible the rotations are perfect? Absolutely. Is that why this team is at where they are right now after 59 games? That's where I'm a little bit not as sure. The other stuff in terms of playing guys, all kinds of the thing that astounded me with the 5-man unit that is that starting unit, they've only played 24 games together and they're 4th highest in minutes in the NBA. And again, they're minus 13 point something per 100 possessions. And it just shows he does have these things about him where it's look, we're going to fit. I believe this is going to work. And I can't find a specific reason why it's not working. So I'm going to keep going back to it, except with the Kemba part of it it's just very confusing, but I digress. But no, continue, because I completely agree with what you're saying here.
Well, look, like I mentioned, there's been this concerted effort to pick up the pace. Randall has read that memo loud and clear. He's definitely been doing that. There've been a lot more hit ahead passes. They've been pushing off rebounds. It's great to see. But look, if that's what you're doing quarters 1 through 3, you better be getting subs in, because guys are going to be gassed. They're going to be exhausted in the 4th quarter in crunch time when it matters. And they're going to have nothing left to give. You need, I know the subs, the second unit has been struggling. IQ and Obi have been really struggling. You have to show them some trust. And Thibs putting IQ back in for that last play showed a great deal of trust. And I hope that,
I like that.
I liked it a lot. I hope it carries through, even though IQ missed that shot. You need to show your players that you trust them, that they will find their way, that they'll play their way out of it. Because if you don't trust your second unit, the starters are just going to be too exhausted to perform when it matters.
And they are. And I think we're seeing that now game after game. And I think in Thibs' mind, it's and he talks about this so often, about how you prepare for a season and, he obviously values conditioning in an insane amount. And like that was the first thing he praised Julius for before even last season, I think even began. Right. So in his mind, like, I don't think there is a part of him where it's like, I need to accept the reality that my guys are just going to not be able to give it their all. I think his view is like, they need to find something in themselves to give it because it is what is best for the team. And I believe these guys, so he hasn't adjusted there. Do we think he's going to adjust in that area? I don't know. Maybe, probably not.
I know all of Knicks Twitter is calling for play the kids. And I know you would like to see it. I would like to see it. I just have no confidence that we're going to. And that's kind of what makes it hard to look forward to the remainder of these games, because I mean, there is young talent on this team. When RJ comes back, where's Cam Reddish going to fit into the rotation? That's a real question. And I don't think Knicks fans are going to like the answer to it.
Well, if it's still about winning games, look, you could look it up. Cam Reddish, worst on off on the team since he's gotten traded here. Like they're getting outscored by 15 points per 100 possessions when he's on the floor. Limited sample size, hasn't gotten comfortable, started out rusty. He's looked better of late. But like, I don't know. But again, that goes back to like, what are your organizational priorities? What do you want to do with these last 24 games? Which is right back to where we started, right? It's like, what's the purpose of the rest of the season?
And Thibs critics would say, look, you are losing anyway. Like that is already happening. And so losing with Cam Reddish in a lot of Knicks fans' eyes is better than losing with Alec Burks. It's like, if the result is the same, then can we just focus on the process and focus on development? And I think that's where the frustration is. That's where the frustration is going to continue to be. Look, I've frankly been quite critical of Cam Reddish. I didn't like him in Atlanta, so it's hard for me to like flip a switch and all of a sudden like him in New York. You look at the numbers, you look at the tape. There are a lot of problems with his game. Maybe you could talk yourself into like a coach who holds him accountable would be really good for him, and maybe Thibs could be that. And maybe we see that after a prolonged amount of time of practice, that Cam Reddish can kind of carry some change his principles and bring them onto the court for games. But there's certainly not been enough time for that at this point. Look,
no,
the biggest questions for the remainder of the season: can Quickley get back on track? Can Obi perform at a level that we saw him with Derrick Rose and like.
Let's talk about Obi for a second. Where are you at on Obi? I just generally.
Like as far as his ceiling, or just kind of
far as just like if you're let's pretend we're GMs for another team, and like we've watched this year, and like we see what we see, and like we acknowledge all of the Knicks issues and say, okay, well maybe that's contributing to Obi not having a better year. The fact that he hasn't got a lot of playing time, but then I looked it up today. He's 20 of 85 from deep this year. Like he's shooting 23% from long range. Like at some point you just have to look at that and be like, okay, well, this guy may not be a shooter. And if he's not a shooter, like where does that leave him as a player that you may want to make decisions around moving forward as an organization? I don't know the answer to that.
That's the struggle. Is he is such a specific type of player that needs a very certain kind of environment to be successful. And, I'll reference Benji again, because, he makes some very strong points that, Taj Gibson has kind of become this almost stretch five where he can sit in the corner and be at least somewhat of a threat. Certainly more of a threat, I think, than Obi, though Obi is extremely willing to let it go. That's not always in the best interest of the team. That Obi should be the guy setting the screen and rolling. That Obi should be that, you space Taj out to the corner, you spread the floor, and you get Obi to set those screens. I don't know that Obi's like a great screen setter at this point. He's got, kind of a weaker lower body. Where am I at with Obi? I think that he is I think that he's a pretty limited player. Frankly, I know I don't want to get.
No, look, I don't disagree with you. You know,
certainly on the ball, I don't see a lot of upside for him to like create for himself. I just don't think he has that kind of like body control when he's not flying through the air.
He shows you little flashes where he might put the ball on the floor, and it's like the acrobatic finishes. Boy, do they look great! Like they look amazing. I'm not even talking about the lobs. I'm talking about like when he gets a little space to move and he has a bit of a runway. And he could kind of, do one of these little flip shots or up and unders or whatever else. And it's like, man, that's a big dude. He could jump really high. It has that kind of skill finishing around the rim, but how often can you rely on that? And like, how do you, again, if you're an organization and you're trying to build moving forward, like, do you factor this guy in as like, okay, we need to account for this person's presence on our team and like how we build it out from here. And that's the part that I'm uncertain about.
And I've been trying to kind of figure out sort of, comps for these guys, like what I think are reasonable expectations for them in their prime, right? Yeah. Like what could Obi Toppin reasonably be? And if I said a name like Montrezl Harrell to you, where it's like, this guy is like not going to contribute all that much defensively, but offensively, he's going to, hustle. He's going to be a real pain to guard. He's going to grab offensive rebounds. He's going to finish everything near the basket. Like, to me, there's a world where Obi brings that kind of Montrezl Harrell value. How does that strike you?
Not well, minus the. I was going to say minus the toughness, but at the same time, Montrezl Harrell's toughness does not manifest itself at all on the defensive end. But it does. You do feel him when you're out there. I feel like, or when you're watching him on the court, I feel like you Trez is always out there. Like I'll always. Oh yes, he's much meaner. I always think back to the game against the Clippers. I think it was. Oh my god! I think it was 2 years ago when Trez like just ate Mitchell Robinson's lunch. It was like an afternoon game, and Andrew is the one with the photographic memory. I don't know if he was paying attention to every Knick game back then. He may remember. No, okay, he's shaking his head. But it was like a game in LA, and like Trez went crazy. But at the same time, I think Obi can do stuff with the ball that Trez can't do. I actually, that's not a bad comp. And what is Trez? He's a guy that's going to help you a lot in the regular season, and there's a reason that he was just traded for a second round pick. He's
a little past his prime, I think, at this point. But I'm not even talking about like stylistically. True. I'm not talking about stylistically. I'm talking more about like
impact,
value, and impact. Yes, exactly. And that's why Quickley is a guy who, it's funny. I know like Quickley was your guy last year.
Oh,
like,
that
was your favorite player.
It was my favorite player. He was my favorite player at the beginning of this year, and now I watch him, and you nailed it. Where is the joy? Where is the joy? He played with nothing but joy, and now it's like, and who do you blame for that? Do you blame Quickley just because he's like not making shots? Do you blame the organization for trying to force him into becoming more of a point guard for his long-term development? Do you blame Tom Thibodeau for maybe taking away a little bit of his confidence? I don't know.
It's funny, man, because like you go back and if you were to look at cleaning the glass, Quickley spent more time at point guard in his rookie year, technically. Like, yeah. And then I was checking out, I think, Stacey Patton's Twitter feed, and he pointed out that IQ finished more or a higher percentage of his shots out of the pick and roll as the ball handler last year. Like he had the ball in his hand more last year as the facilitator. Yeah. If you were to look at it that way, I think it is not so simple to answer your question. Like it's a confluence of a lot of factors. And I think certainly IQ deserves a lot of the blame, but I do think that he can dig himself out of this. And kind of the comp that I wanted to ask for you, to you was George Hill for him. Like George Hill was the fifth best starter on some very good teams. He was a two-way player. He hit threes. He was the point guard technically, but but he wasn't the main facilitator. Like, right? Like,
well, I mean, when I think of George Hill, the first thing that I'm probably always going to think of is the guy that was traded for Kawhi Leonard, and for a solid year, if not more, that trade was looked at as like, hey, win-win. both teams came out of it on top because the Pacers were like, hey, this is exactly the point guard that we needed, right? It was a guy who, like, when he filled in for Tony Parker way back in the day, I was like, man, this guy, like, he was really good. So, but I think I think the comp makes a little bit more sense of like mid to late career George Hill, right? As like he's the fifth guy out there. He's going to be solid in all of the areas you ask him to be solid. And I do think that's a great comp. The one that I've been tossing around since somebody mentioned it earlier this year was Jason Terry as like a ceiling for IQ. But, you know, Jason Terry scored 19,000 career points, you know?
Yeah. No, Jason Terry was something else. And was, you know,
awesome.
Was he like the third best player on that Mavs championship team?
You know, so yeah. Okay. So after Dirk, you had Tyson, you had J Kidd, you had Marion, and you had Terry.
Yeah.
You could argue any of those guys as second. You could argue any of those guys as fifth, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So I just think, like, as far as a realistic comp, you know, they both have the long arms. They can both defend on the perimeter. I will say that's been the issue with Quickley recently, is like defensively, he's just been kind of getting cooked.
It's been so strange because he was so good in that area earlier in the year.
All the fouls too. He can't, like, his technique is bad. His closeouts have been bad. It's like very technical stuff too. And it is really difficult to know what to attribute that to. If he's just in his own head and not able to concentrate to a degree, but it is troubling because he was your favorite player last year. He was the fan base's, you know, like
there was a point in time I was wondering if he had the highest ceiling of any young player on the team. And now if you ask me, I don't know that I would put him in the top 5. Probably like it would come down like, let's do that. I've been asked this question a bunch. I'll ask you, give me your anybody on a rookie contract, your ceiling, highest ceiling.
So I'm still going to RJ. So stealing these, I mean, because I'm always just kind of like reasonable. It's a reasonable steal.
Factor in likelihood of getting there. How about that?
Okay. I still go RJ just because of his ability to create off the bounce. You know, I think that Grimes'
easy answer.
Grimes' limitations there are real, and not to say that he's only a catch and shoot guy or only a 3-and-D guy. That's not true. But I don't think that he projects certainly to RJ's level of being able to play on the ball. So RJ is still 1. Grimes is 2, just because, I mean, Grimes' floor is absurdly high. Like I'm still, I mean, he's been a reason to watch recently. He's been the reason to watch.
I was about to say he's been the reason to watch. The last 2 games, he's the guy I'm most excited to see. I'm with you on the top 2. Who's your number 3?
See, and then I think that my 3 is Quickley. I still
ahead of Mitch and ahead of Cam.
And Obi's on there too, right?
Obi. So for me, I think I have Cam, Mitch, and Quickley in a group of 3 after RJ and Grimes. Yeah. And Mitch doing what he's been doing of late has really made me think long and hard about this question. And then Cam, I just like, again, I know all the same things about Cam that you do, but then you wonder, like, if he figures it out, you know, it's like, so no, but okay. If you have Quickley 3, I got it. So
for me, I would go Quickley 3, Mitch 4, Cam 5, and Obi 6.
And Obi 6. Okay.
I think for me, I need guys to be able to dribble, pass, and shoot. Like it's basketball. Like I need it, you know, like
this is baseball season.
Like Mitch is so valuable protecting the rim, but I mean, you have to factor in feasibility here. He hobbles every game. It is just so worrisome the way he lumbers, the way he walks. Like he never looks like comfortable. Not never. He rarely looks comfortable out there. When he does, it is tantalizing. But again, there are ways to scheme against that. Like he's not gonna beat you with the pass. He can't put it on the floor for the most part unless he steals and goes coast to coast, which, you know, we saw that in the last game. But I do worry a little bit about kind of just Mitch's fundamentals.
Okay.
And then, you know, Cam and Obi, both have great athleticism, both have some really interesting tools, But for me, I think I'm putting them in kind of a tier at the bottom there. So
it's interesting you say that. Based on what I've been able to glean, well, there was some reporting, I believe, from Berman that there was discussion of a Mitch deal potentially. I think with Detroit at the deadline that there may have been some disagreement in terms of how that would look, or at least that's what I heard. But I think they were willing to like talk Mitch and like put Mitch on the table, but they just wanted a lot. And I don't know if it was, did Thibs quash it? I don't know that they asked for too much, like whatever it is. And then, Cam, it was already reported, right, that he was going to be part of that three-way trade in which he would have been going to the Lakers, right? And they would have gotten back, I guess, some picks and Goran Dragic. And then, Obi, I could sit here and say I think they're curious what the level of interest in him is around the league. But like RJ, Grimes, Quickley, I have no indication that those guys, like the organization would ever think about. I mean, obviously, look, Quickley's not nobody's untradeable. But like, I think if you were to ask me what I think the organization thinks about who are the top three, I think those would be their top three as well. So maybe that's comforting. I don't know.
I just have a huge deal of confidence that Quickley is going to be able to turn it around.
Completely agree.
He showed us too much in his rookie season, and just how much confidence he has. Like, talk about a guy who wanted to take the last shot. Like, he was never scared of the moment. And also, this is a little thing, but we criticized his defense, and his on-ball defense has been terrible. And like I said, his closeouts have been bad. He's still a shockingly good rim protector as a guard, man. It's crazy. Like, almost like, I don't want to invoke Dwayne Wade's name here, but that's who you're throwing around. Like, this is a guy who I think his wingspan's like 6'11" or something crazy. He gets straight up vertical and jumps as high as he can. Like, his technique when he rotates over to defend, it's to defend the restricted area. It's really impressive. I think he's got a frame to put on some muscle. I'm bullish on his work ethic, that his shot's going to come back. And like I said, you have to be able to dribble, pass, and shoot in this league. And so that's why I put him over the other guys.
But that's where, and again, I'm the one who defends Thibs. And I wonder if a month ago or a month and a half ago, instead of whatever fucking direction they ended up going, they were, and I think it was Pelton who suggested this on Zach Lowe's podcast. Like, start quickly, see what he's got, like, I think that, it takes a certain level of organizational confidence and maturity to be like, we're going to do a thing that may not be in the best interest of this season in terms of winning the most games we could do this season. And it is a bit of a risk, and it may, there is a chance it doesn't work out, but like, you look at where Quickley is now, and I just wonder, like, if they had given him more, like, especially, and when he was on that hot stretch. So it's like, there was a time where you could look at him and be like, he's absolutely earned it. And they didn't go in that direction because, Thibs is kind of a stickler, and he goes by what he knows, and what he knows has gotten us here. And
I know you've heard me say this before, but the whole Quickley isn't a point guard discourse.
It's a stupid discourse.
It's irrelevant. It's not, it doesn't matter for this team specifically. I've said before, Kemba, the way he's being utilized is not that of a traditional point guard. It's not how Kemba's been used his whole career, as a pick and roll point guard. Get Quickley in there. Let him stand in the corner like Kemba. If that's how you're going to use him, sure. But at least you have his defense. His transition defense is going to be so much better. And, he's also a threat. It's not like he's a non-factor on the offensive end. You kick it out to Quickley, you can get a catch and shoot shot. You can get a drive and dish. Like, he's able to keep the ball moving too. And I think if he were kind of in that starting lineup, he wouldn't feel necessarily all that freedom to just launch these ridiculous shots. I know his shot profile, his shot selection is heavily criticized, as it should be. But when you're next to Julius Randle and Julius Randle's giving you that look, I don't think you're taking a bunch of those shots, with with 10 minutes left in the first quarter. I just don't think you're going to do it. Like, so I think it would be good for him, for his discipline, frankly, to be in that starting unit too, where RJ and Julius and Fournier are carrying a lot of the ball handling responsibilities, and Quickley is just out there to basically not get cooked like Kemba does.
Yeah, and I referenced it earlier, and I'll reference it again. It is. I'm pretty good at thinking. As a former lawyer, I'm pretty good about thinking up arguments for shit. Give me something, and I will give you a reason why the thing is the way it is. It may be far-fetched, it may be utter nonsense, but I'll give you something. And just watching Kemba out there continue to play minutes for this team is borderline astounding to me. And it is something I cannot wrap my mind around, other than to say that his benching the first time, I think, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And does that have something to do with it now? The fact that and will it change after the All-Star break? Was there some kind of agreement? Like, we'll give it to the break and we'll see where we're at. If we're not at a good place, then we'll call it a year. Like, I don't really know. But that to me, like, a lot of people have like keyed in on Burks and like, oh, why is Burks still out there? Burks is a good, versatile player. I know he's being used in a role that nobody wants to see him in right now, but he's a good basketball player. You could fit him with any other four guys. The Kemba being out there, it makes no sense to me. But
just Burks' usage in crunch time, I think, is a little perplexing.
That's problematic. Yeah.
And like you said, it is the way he's being used, but the fact that like the crunch time offense is high pick and roll with 12 seconds left on the shot clock, with Gibson setting a screen for Burks, like it's not what fans want, and it's not yielding the results that Thibs wants either. So no one's winning here.
Nope.
So, and
the fact that that's what they have resorted to as like, this is our best offense right now, should tell you, tells you a lot, I guess. But
yeah.
All right. Finish up. What do you give me one thing you hope for? Give me one thing you're wondering. Give me one thing you're excited about. Just give me one thing that from, we'll have you, obviously you be on again before the end of the year, but like, for the foreseeable future, for the next several weeks, like what's something that's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you guys for sending me to the G League game that I got to go cover for you guys, because that was really cool. And
anytime.
No, and I would like to do that again. And what I'd really like to see is Deuce play. I really want to see Deuce in person. I'm hoping that there'll be an opportunity to do that. But that's a guy that I know a lot of the fan base wants to see in that point guard spot. I'm thinking that there's going to be a time and place, whether there's games where Kemba's shut down for maintenance or anything like that. I think that we're going to, after the All-Star break, Deuce is just too much of a Thibs player, like a get in your jersey, physical perimeter force, really.
But that's why it doesn't make any sense.
That's why I think that's going to turn at some point before the season's over. Yeah. And I would love to see Deuce come in and make some impact, because, man, the dude he's no joke. He is. And like the G League coach told me, like, it's infectious. Like, the teammates feed off of what he does. And I would love to see that infect the Knicks locker room a little bit.
They could stand to be infected with something, for better or worse. That's for sure. This was great. It's always comforting to talk to you, because it makes me take a step back off the ledge, because you're as good a basketball mind as there is out there who is covering this team. And I always feel very privileged that we get to pick your brain about stuff. Before I let you go, is there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to touch on?
We got all the basketball stuff. I did have one question for both you and Andrew, though, because I know with the Oscars coming up, I want to know what's the deal? What should I want? Like, what was your guys' favorite Best Picture nominee? Because I've only seen like 3 of them, and I have a favorite, but I mean, of that small sample, I'm curious. Do you guys have predictions? Do you have favorites? Like, I want to hear some movie talk from you guys.
You should go ahead and place your bet on Power of the Dog in as many categories as you can right now. It's gonna do very well.
I saw that. It was well done.
Yeah, I'm with you. It was a very nice, well done movie. You know,
it didn't like pull me in and like really. The ending was crazy, but any other Andrew? What do you think?
That's funny because remember the last time you were here when you said, "Hey, I just watched Power of the Dog. It was fine," and I was like, "Yeah, I thought so too. I thought it would, like the second half is better than the first, but it's gonna get a ton of nominations." Little did I know it's gonna be like the runaway front runner come Oscar season and probably a coronation for Jane Campion.
Oh, I know. Have you seen Coda yet?
That was the one. That was my favorite one I've seen so far.
That's the best. I mean, if that's not the feel good movie of the year, I don't really know what is.
So let me say this. We're doing, Oz and I, we're taking a break from the final review format this week, and we're doing our best movies of 2021. So the episode this week is a literal recommendation for movies that people haven't seen, most likely. My number one movie wasn't nominated for Best Picture this year. My number two movie was not nominated for Best Picture this year. But I will just shout out Paul Thomas Anderson's movie, which is in my top 5, Licorice Pizza, which is like the biggest 180 I did on a movie.
You're muted.
How did I do that?
I don't know.
You look at, have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Tarantino movie?
Yes.
Okay, so the mystique and like the magic of like LA in the 60s, he does that. He creates that with Leo and Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie and the entire history of cinema, right? Like that's what creates the fairy tale of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And PTA accomplishes that with like Silicon Valley and like a first-time actor in Alana Haim and Philip Seymour Hoffman's kid, and almost exceeds the level of magic that's in that movie because of how great of a story that is. So that would be my big recommendation is Licorice Pizza.
And I'll give just one more. If you haven't seen The Lost Daughter, it's available on Netflix. It is not the most exciting. What do you call that? Not logline. Whatever. Like the 2-sentence description of a movie.
Oh, like the elevator pitch, the elevator tagline. Yeah. The summary. But it contained
my favorite performance of the year, and I'm not talking about from Olivia Colman. And I was very, very, very happy that Jessie Buckley got nominated for Best Supporting Actress for that. But I would strongly recommend The Lost Daughter.
All right.
And have you seen Tick, Tick, Boom?
I have not. I am not a huge musical guy.
I'm not either. It's awesome. It's so much fun.
Here's what I'll just add on to what John said about it's awesome is that what you do is you create content. And what I related to with this, I know John related to this too, is it really shows like the struggle that you go through when you're creating. It shows what failure also feels and looks like. Then there's like the emotions where like real world stuff comes in and your problems get put into perspective. And it's like, oh, so now I look at my failures and struggles a little differently. The entire story is relatable, especially for people like us that trust an audience with the thing we put out there. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So
and it gets into
the other element aside from the music.
If you've ever, not that any of us on here would fall into this category, but if you've ever been obsessed with that which you, spend your time creating, this is a movie that will resonate with you also. So yeah, definitely strong recommendation for that.
There you go.
So no, appreciate you guys filling me in on the movie stuff. I got a lot to catch up on.
There's also this I think this is indie film that I don't know if you guys, hold on. Spider-Man No Way Home.
I knew you were going to do that.
I don't know if you've seen it or not. Got some Oscar winners in it if you want to check it out.
I've heard of it.
Should have been nominated for Best Picture.
Biggest movie of the year. Biggest movie of the last 2 years. Made more money than almost the entire top 10 at the Oscars, or the Best Picture category outside of Dune. Yes, Spider-Man No Way Home.
This was a lot of fun. Tom, you are awesome. I should have said at the top, but I will say it in our intro to the show, so I'll make sure I get it in there. Still co-hosting Talkin Knicks. Always killing it on there. You are the man, dude. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.